"This is the mistake from my first marriage," my father said, glass raised, smile wide, in front of 40 relatives at our family reunion. Everyone laughed. His new wife squeezed his arm. His stepdaughter looked at her shoes. And I stood there, holding a glass of water, wearing the same smile I'd practiced for 22 years. But that night, something in me shifted. Because I had something on my phone, something I'd been carrying for 3 months, something I never planned to use, until he made it impossible not to. What I showed them didn't just embarrass my father. It destroyed the entire story he'd been telling this family for a decade. And his new wife? She never saw it coming. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back 6 months before that reunion. To the day a text message landed on the wrong phone. My parents divorced when I was 7. I remember the morning my father left because he didn't take his coffee mug off the counter. My mother washed it, dried it, and put it in a box. She never said a bad word about him, not once. Richard Hicks remarried 2 years later, Vanessa Caldwell. She was younger, polished, and she smiled at me the way people smile at someone else's luggage, politely, briefly, and with the hope that it would be moved soon. She had a daughter from a previous relationship. Megan, blonde hair, quiet eyes, 2 years younger than me. Within 6 months, Megan had my bedroom at Dad's house. Vanessa said it made more sense. Megan was there full-time and I only visited weekends. Then the weekends got shorter. Vanessa would call my mother on Friday afternoons. "Richard's exhausted. Maybe next week?" Next week became next month. Next month became holidays only. I still tried. Every birthday, I called. Every Christmas, I showed up with a gift wrapped in paper I picked out myself. I'd sit on the edge of the couch while Megan opened her pile of presents, and I'd wait for my father to look at me the way he looked at her. He never did. The family Christmas card arrived at my mother's house every December. 3 faces: Richard, Vanessa, Megan, matching sweaters, a golden retriever. The kind of family you'd find in a picture frame at Target. I wasn't in a single one. 22 years. Not one. I used to tell myself it was an oversight. 22 years is a long time to call something an oversight, but I kept showing up. Because I believed that if I was patient enough, loyal enough, good enough, he'd eventually see me. I was wrong about that for a very long time. The day I graduated from nursing school was the proudest moment of my life. 4 years of late nights, clinical rotations, and a student loan balance that made my stomach hurt. But I did it. Top 15% of my class. I sent my father 2 tickets, front row. I wrote a note on the inside of the envelope. "It would mean the world to have you there." He texted back 3 days later. "Wouldn't miss it." Graduation morning, I ironed my white dress. My mother drove 90 minutes from her apartment in Richmond. We got there early. She sat in the second row. My father's seats were in the first. The ceremony started. I looked out at the crowd during the processional. My mother was beaming. The 2 seats beside her were empty. I walked across that stage, shook the dean's hand, and smiled for the camera. When I got back to my seat, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. That evening, I scrolled Facebook. There it was, a photo of Richard, Vanessa, and Megan at a college football game. Megan in a foam finger, Vanessa in sunglasses. My father with his arm around both of them. Posted 3 hours before my ceremony. He hadn't forgotten. He'd chosen. My mother found me on the porch that night, still in my white dress, mascara on my wrists. She sat beside me and said, "Honey, stop setting yourself on fire to keep him warm." I heard her. I just wasn't ready to listen. "He's still my dad," I said. She didn't argue. She just held my hand. I didn't know then that his absence at my graduation was the kindest version of what he was capable of. The cruelest was still 6 years away, waiting for me at a long table under string lights. 6 months before the reunion, my phone rang on a Tuesday night. I was halfway through a 12-hour shift in the ER, running on cold coffee and adrenaline. "Dahlia, it's Grandma." Eleanor Hicks, 81 years old, sharp as a scalpel and twice as direct. "You're coming to the reunion this July. I don't care what your father says." I hesitated. Last year, Richard told me the reunion was immediate family only. I found out later from a cousin's Instagram that 35 people had been there. Vanessa posted a group photo with the caption, "The whole Hicks family together." I wasn't in it, because I wasn't invited. "Grandma, I don't know if—" "You are a Hicks. That's not something he gets to decide." The way she said it, steady, certain, like she was reading from something older than all of us. I couldn't say no. "Okay, I'll be there." "Good. Wear something comfortable. And bring your appetite." I smiled. It was the first time in months that anything about the name Hicks made me smile. 2 weeks later, I was packing a bag for a weekend shift when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. ER nurses get spam calls like other people get junk mail, but I opened it. "Hey babe, V said Richard's gonna do the family thing again this summer. You gonna come watch the show?" I read it 3 times. V. Vanessa. The family thing. The show. The message wasn't meant for me. Someone, a man, based on the tone, had the wrong number. Or rather, he had what used to be my number. The one I gave up at 18. The one Vanessa took over when I switched plans. I stared at that text for 11 minutes. Then I took a screenshot. I didn't reply. I didn't block the number. I just saved it and put my phone face down on the nightstand. For 2 weeks, I told myself it was nothing. A friend of Vanessa's, an inside joke I didn't understand. Maybe the show was a barbecue theme, and I was reading too much into an emoji. Then the second message came. Same number. No text this time, just a photo. Vanessa at a restaurant I didn't recognize. A man across from her. Their hands were intertwined over a basket of bread. His thumb was tracing her knuckle. She was laughing with her head tilted back, the way people laugh when they've forgotten anyone might be watching. The man wasn't my father. Below the photo. "Miss you already. Tuesday can't come soon enough." My stomach dropped. I sat on my bathroom floor for a long time. Not because I cared about Vanessa's marriage. I didn't. But because I understood something mechanical about what was happening. This man, whoever he was, had my old phone number saved under Vanessa's name. And he was sending her messages to me by accident. Which meant Vanessa had given him my old number as her own. Which meant she was hiding this relationship somewhere my father would never look. I saved the photo. I saved the text. I put them in a folder on my phone labeled insurance. And I locked it with a passcode. I wasn't looking for ammunition, but ammunition doesn't care whether you're looking. Over the next few weeks, 3 more messages trickled in. A selfie of the man in a hotel bathroom, a voice note I didn't play, and 1 more text. Derek misses his V. Derek. Now he had a name. A month before the reunion, I drove to Richmond to see my mother. Linda Hicks, though she'd gone back to her maiden name. Linda Porter, the day the divorce was finalized. We sat in her kitchen. Same yellow curtains. She made chamomile tea the way she always did. Too much honey, not enough patience for it to cool. "I need to tell you something," she said. "And I need you to hear it without getting upset." I set down my mug. "Eleanor called me last week. She let something slip. Richard's been talking to a lawyer about updating his estate documents." I waited. "He's planning to leave everything to Megan. The savings account, the property share from Eleanor's trust, all of it. Your name isn't in any of it." I looked at the tea. The honey was still swirling at the bottom, slow and golden. "I don't care about the money, Mom." "I know you don't. But honey, it's not about the money. He's erasing you, officially, on paper. And if he does it before the reunion, it becomes the version everyone accepts." She was right. If I stayed silent, if I smiled through another dinner and drove home alone, the reunion would become a coronation. Megan as the heir, Vanessa as the matriarch in waiting, and me as the footnote no one bothered to read. "You can't make someone love you, sweetheart," my mother said, "but you can stop letting them hurt you." I drove home that night with the windows down. The May air was warm and thick with honeysuckle, but the money wasn't what kept me up that night. It was a question. If Megan is the daughter he chose, does he even know who she really is? I want to be honest with you. What happened next? I'm not proud of how I found it, but I also didn't go looking. It was a Wednesday. I was scrolling through the messages from Derek's number. Not to snoop, but to figure out if I should tell someone. A pastor, a counselor, I didn't know. And then I found the message that changed everything. It was sandwiched between a restaurant photo and a heart emoji. Vanessa had apparently sent Derek a long message, and because Derek's phone thought my number was hers, his reply showed me context I was never supposed to see. Derek had written, "Does Megan know about us?" And Vanessa had replied. The text appeared in his quoted response. "She doesn't know. And she never will. R thinks she's mine. That's all that matters." I read it 4 times. R thinks she's mine. Vanessa had always told the family that Megan was her biological daughter from a previous relationship. It was the foundation of everything. Why Richard embraced Megan so completely, why he gave her his name, why she was the centerpiece of his new family portrait. But according to Vanessa's own words, that story was a lie. Megan wasn't her biological child. She had adopted or taken custody of Megan, and told Richard the girl was hers by blood. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, from the weight of knowing something that could shatter 3 people's lives. I saved the screenshot. Same folder, same passcode. Then I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and cried. Not for Richard, not for Vanessa, for Megan. A 16-year-old girl standing in the middle of a story she didn't know was fiction. I had 2 grenades in my pocket. I was praying I'd never have to pull the pin. July 14th. I pulled onto the gravel drive of Eleanor's farm outside Charlottesville at 9 in the morning. The tires crunched slow and loud, the way footsteps sound in a library. The farm was everything a Virginia postcard promises. White clapboard house with a wraparound porch, oak trees older than the county. A long table had already been dragged out to the side yard, and someone had strung lights between the walnut trees, the kind that don't turn on until dusk, when everything looks softer than it is. Eleanor was on the porch in her wicker chair, a glass of sweet tea sweating in her hand. "You're early," she said. "You told me to bring my appetite. I figured I'd earn it." She smiled. I helped her carry platters out to the table. We laid down checkered cloth, set out mason jars with wildflowers, and arranged 40 place settings. 40 forks, 40 knives, 40 napkins folded into triangles. At one point, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was softer than it used to be, but her eyes weren't. "Whatever happens today, you hold your head up." I didn't know what she meant. Or maybe I did. Cars began arriving around noon. Uncles I hadn't seen in years. Cousins with new babies. Great Aunt Patricia with her famous corn pudding and her famous opinions. Then, at 1:15, a black Lexus pulled in. Vanessa stepped out first. Floral wrap dress, oversized sunglasses, hair blown out like she was walking a carpet. Megan followed in a white sundress, and Richard emerged last, straightening his collar, placing one hand on Vanessa's back and the other on Megan's shoulder. A family portrait, walking. He passed me on the porch without stopping. A glance, a nod. "Oh, you came." 2 words, no hug, and every cousin on that porch heard them. Vanessa worked the crowd the way a campaign manager works a fundraiser. Every handshake had a purpose. Every compliment had a direction. "Have you met our Megan?" she said to Uncle Bill, steering the girl forward by both shoulders. "Top of her class at St. Catherine's. She's looking at pre-law." Megan smiled on cue, a trained smile, the kind that starts and stops at the mouth. When Aunt Patricia turned to me and said, "And Dahlia, sweetheart, what are you up to these days?" Vanessa was there before I could open my mouth. "She's a nurse, night shifts, I think." Vanessa placed a hand on her chest. "Bless her heart. If you're not from the South, you might think that's a compliment. It's not. Bless her heart is a silencer with a ribbon on it. It says, 'Isn't that sweet? Isn't that small? Now let's move on.'" Patricia's smile stiffened. D. Ruth, standing near the lemonade table, lowered her sunglasses and watched Vanessa walk away. Eleanor, from her porch chair, didn't blink. I poured myself a glass of water and said nothing. I was used to this. I'd been the background character in the Richard Hicks show for 22 years. One more afternoon wouldn't kill me, or so I thought. It was Cousin Jake who pulled me aside near the oak tree. "Hey, Dahlia, can I ask you something?" "Sure." He leaned in. Is it true your dad's cutting you out of Grandma's side too? Vanessa was telling Aunt Carol about it last night. The water in my glass went still. Not because of the news, I already knew, but because Vanessa had been campaigning. She'd been laying groundwork, telling the family before I could. This wasn't carelessness. This was a strategy. The speech came after the brisket. It's a Hicks tradition. The eldest son stands up after the main course, taps his glass, and says a few words about family. My grandfather started it. My father inherited it the way he inherited everything, by assuming it was his right. Richard pushed his chair back and stood. The legs scraped the flagstone, and 40 conversations dropped to a murmur. I want to talk about family, he began. He was good at this. The pauses, the eye contact, the practiced warmth. About what it means to be a Hicks. About loyalty. About legacy. He placed his hand on Megan's shoulder. I want to introduce someone, my real daughter. Megan stood, blushing. Richard listed her accomplishments: honor roll, student council, volunteer work at the animal shelter. Each one landed like a medal pinned to a uniform. The table applauded. Vanessa touched her collarbone like she might cry. Then someone, I think it was Uncle Bill, said, "What about Dahlia?" Richard looked at me the way you look at a receipt you forgot to throw away. Oh, Dahlia, he chuckled. She's the mistake from my first marriage. He laughed first, the way a host laughs at his own joke to give the audience permission, and they followed. Not everyone. Patricia didn't. Ruth didn't. Eleanor set her fork down with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence, but enough of them laughed, enough to fill the air, enough to make it real. Vanessa squeezed Richard's arm. Megan looked at the grass, and I stood there, water in my hand, face perfectly still, while 40 people decided that my father's cruelty was a punchline. 40 people, and not one of them said a word. Not yet. There's a sound the world makes when it stops pretending. It's not loud. It's the opposite. It's the silence between the laughter dying and the next fork hitting a plate. A silence shaped like a held breath. That's the sound I heard. The string lights blinked on. Dusk had come without my noticing. The citronella candles on the table threw shadows that wobbled in the breeze. Someone refilled a glass. Someone complimented the cobbler. The evening went on, but inside me, a 22-year-old dam was cracking. I looked down at my phone in my pocket. I could feel it against my thigh, the weight of 3 months of screenshots, a folder called insurance, and a truth that didn't belong to me but had landed in my lap anyway. I looked at Megan across the table. 16, picking at a biscuit. She hadn't asked for any of this. She wasn't the villain. She was a prop that Vanessa dressed up and Richard displayed because she fit the story he wanted to tell. I looked at Eleanor. She was watching me from her chair at the head of the table. Her eyes were sharp and bright, like 2 lit windows in a dark house. She gave me the smallest nod. Not a nod that said do something, a nod that said I'm here. I touched the edge of my phone but didn't pull it out. Not yet. There's a difference between keeping the peace and losing yourself. I'd been confusing the two for 22 years. Keeping the peace meant swallowing my name when he mispronounced it. Losing myself meant standing in a yard full of my own blood relatives while they laughed at the word mistake and I said nothing. I wasn't going to start a war, but I wasn't going to stand here and be erased. Ruth found me near the hydrangeas. I was pretending to admire them. She wasn't pretending anything. That was disgusting, she said. No preamble. Ruth Hicks Brennan didn't do preambles. She did opening statements. I'm fine, Aunt Ruth. No, you're not, and you shouldn't have to be. She crossed her arms. Ruth was 48, 5'3", and had once made a real estate developer cry in a deposition. She wore linen trousers and reading glasses on a chain, and she looked at the world like it was a contract she hadn't finished reviewing. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Did your father tell you he asked me to revise his estate plan? Mom mentioned it. Ruth's jaw tightened. I refused. Something about Vanessa's paperwork didn't add up. Dates that didn't match. A custody document that referenced a county I couldn't verify. My heartbeat shifted. I kept my face neutral. 22 years of practice. What do you mean? I mean I'm a lawyer, and lawyers notice things. She paused. I told Richard he needed to get Vanessa's documents independently verified before I'd touch anything. He told me I was being difficult. Then he found another attorney. She looked at me sideways. Dahlia, if you know something, anything, about that woman, now would be a good time to decide what you want to do with it. I met her eyes. I don't know what I know yet. It wasn't a lie. I had screenshots. I had a name, Derek. I had a message that said R thinks she's mine. But I didn't have proof in the legal sense. I had pieces of a picture I wasn't sure I wanted to assemble. I don't take sides, Ruth said. But I hate lies. She walked back to the table. I stayed by the hydrangeas another minute. My phone felt heavier in my pocket than it had an hour ago. I went inside to help Eleanor clear the dessert plates. The kitchen was warm and smelled like peach cobbler and dish soap. I had my hands in the sink when I heard the screen door close behind me. Vanessa. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, the way someone stands when they want you to know they're in charge of the room. You should leave before the bonfire, she said. Quiet, almost gentle, the voice of a woman who'd learned that the softest threats are the hardest to prove. Eleanor invited me. His mother is 81, Dahlia. She won't be around forever. She paused to let that land. And when she's gone, you'll have no reason to come back. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands slowly, looked at her. For 22 years, I'd assumed Vanessa was careless, the way a person who wins by default can afford to be careless. But standing in that kitchen, 3 feet from her cold smile, I understood something I should have understood years ago. This wasn't carelessness. This was architecture. Every missed invitation, every whispered aside to relatives, every bless her heart. Vanessa hadn't stumbled into my erasure. She'd built it, brick by brick, year by year, and she'd done it with a smile so polished that no one ever thought to look behind it. I told Richard to update the will, she said. He listened. He always listens to me. She said it like a woman showing you the lock on the door from the inside. I said nothing. I picked up a dish towel, folded it, hung it on the oven handle. She walked out of that kitchen thinking she'd won. She had no idea I was holding her entire house of cards in my back pocket. The screen door banged shut. Outside, someone was starting the bonfire. The bonfire was Richard's idea. He loved a stage. Someone had dragged the Adirondack chairs into a half circle around the fire pit. The flames crackled and spit. Fireflies competed with the embers. It would have been beautiful if it weren't a courtroom. Richard stood again. Second speech of the night. He held a glass of bourbon the way men hold things when they want you to notice their hands are steady. I want to make something official, he said. The chatter died. Megan will be taking the Hicks name, legally. I've already filed the paperwork. Murmurs. A few supportive nods from people who didn't know better. Vanessa smoothed Megan's hair. She's the daughter I was always meant to have. He said it simply, factually, the way you might read a deed transfer. And then he turned, slowly, deliberately, and looked at me. Dahlia, I wish you the best. I really do. His voice carried that practiced sincerity, the kind that fools people who want to be fooled. But let's be honest, you were never really part of this family. The fire popped. A log shifted. No one spoke. Uncle Bill examined his shoes. Patricia gripped the arm of her chair. Cousin Jake stared into the flames like they owed him money. And Vanessa sat behind Richard with her hand on Megan's knee, and she smiled the way a chess player smiles 3 moves before checkmate. Eleanor hadn't come to the bonfire. Her hip was bothering her, she'd said. But through the kitchen window, I could see the light on. She was watching. I held my water glass. My hand was steady. My heartbeat was not. He thought he was closing a chapter. He didn't know I was about to open one. What nobody expected, what I didn't expect, was Megan. She was sitting next to Vanessa, hands folded in her lap the way they teach you in etiquette class. But when Richard said those words, "You were never really part of this family," something moved across her face. Not triumph, not relief. Guilt. "Dad," she said, quiet, almost swallowed by the fire. "Maybe you shouldn't—" "Shh." Richard didn't even look at her. "This is a family matter, sweetheart." He patted her hand the way you pat a dog that barks at company. "Stay. Good girl." Megan sank back into her chair. 16 years old, dressed in white, and disappearing. I watched her, and something in my chest loosened. Not anger, recognition. She was me. A different version, a different role, but the same production. Richard didn't have daughters. He had casting choices. And Megan was the understudy who didn't know the lead had been written out. But understanding Megan's innocence didn't change what was happening to me. Right now, in front of 40 witnesses, my father was erasing me, formally, publicly, with a bonfire as his backdrop and bourbon as his courage. Great Aunt Patricia cleared her throat. "Richard, that girl is your blood." Richard didn't flinch. "Blood doesn't make family, Aunt Pat. Choice does." He had no idea how right he was, and he had no idea how badly that sentence was about to age. The fire crackled. Vanessa crossed her legs. Somewhere behind me, I heard Ruth set her glass down on the arm of her chair, carefully, the way you set down something you might need your hands free for. I looked at the sky. Virginia stars. A clear night. The kind of night that doesn't forgive you for what you do under it. My phone sat warm against my leg. The screen door opened. Eleanor Hicks stepped onto the porch. She had her cane in one hand and 81 years of authority in the other. She moved slowly, but nobody mistook that for weakness. The porch boards creaked under her steps like they were announcing her. She stopped at the top of the stairs, looking down at the bonfire circle. At Richard. At all of us. Richard Allen Hicks. Full name. The way mothers use them when the next sentence is going to leave a mark. "I did not raise you to disown your own child at my table." Richard shifted. "Mom, this isn't the time. This is exactly the time." Her voice was low, but it carried the way a church bell carries. Not because it's loud, but because everything else goes quiet. "You chose this stage. Now stand on it." Vanessa leaned forward. "Eleanor, maybe you should sit down. Your blood pressure—" "My blood pressure is fine." Eleanor fixed Vanessa with a look that could have stripped paint. "My patience is not." Silence. Real silence. Not the polite kind from before, but the kind that sits on your chest. I could feel the whole family holding their breath. 40 people caught between a matriarch and her son, between loyalty and discomfort, between watching and being watched. Eleanor looked at me. That same sharp gaze, that same nod from earlier, and something inside me unlocked. Not rage, not revenge, just a door that had been bolted shut for 22 years, finally swinging open. I stood up, slowly. I smoothed the front of my blouse. I held my water glass in my left hand, steady, quiet, like a nurse walking into a code. I didn't plan a speech, but when I opened my mouth, every word was ready. "Since we're introducing ourselves," I said, "let me take a turn." The fire crackled between us. 40 faces turned toward me, some curious, some uncomfortable. Vanessa's knuckles went white on the arm of her chair. "My name is Dahlia Hicks. I'm 29 years old. I'm an emergency room nurse at Memorial General. I work 60-hour weeks. I've held people's hands while they died and told their families in the hallway." I let that sit. "I've come to every reunion I was invited to. I called on every birthday. I sent Christmas gifts that were never acknowledged. I drove 3 hours each way to be here today because my grandmother asked me to." I looked at Richard. He was standing by the fire, bourbon in hand, and for the first time all evening, his smile was gone. "Tonight, my father called me a mistake, in front of all of you." My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by that. "He introduced his stepdaughter as his real daughter and told 40 people that I, his only biological child, was an error he made 29 years ago." Patricia covered her mouth. Jake looked at his feet. "I could leave. I've left before. I'm good at it." I paused. "But before I do, I have a question. Not for my father." I turned to Vanessa. The color in her face shifted. Just slightly, like a light dimming behind a curtain. "Vanessa, would you like to tell them?" Her eyes widened. "Or should I?" 7 words. But the way they landed, you could hear the fire. You could hear the crickets. You could hear 40 people stop breathing at the same time. The color left her face like someone pulled a plug. Vanessa recovered fast. "I'll give her that. 20 years of performance will teach you how to find your lines. I have no idea what you're talking about. She even managed a small, confused laugh, the kind designed to make the audience think the other person is crazy. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. No dramatic flourish, no speech, just a woman holding a screen. 3 months ago, I received a text message. It was meant for Vanessa, from a man named Derek. I didn't read it aloud. I didn't hold it up like evidence in a courtroom. Instead, I turned the screen toward Ruth, who was sitting 3 chairs to my left. Ruth took the phone. She read. Her expression didn't change at first. And then it did. A small tightening around the jaw. A slow exhale through the nose. Richard, she said. Calm, professional, the voice she used in depositions. You need to see this. Richard scoffed. What is this, an ambush? Look at the phone, Richard. He took it. I watched his eyes move left to right, then stop. The bourbon glass tilted in his hand. A drop ran down the side. Vanessa stood up. Those are fake. She fabricated them. Her voice cracked on the last word. Fabricated. It's a big word to throw at someone when your hands are shaking. The number is still active, I said. You can call Derek right now. Area code 757. He'll pick up. I said it the way I tell a patient's family the test results. Clear, simple. No editorializing. Richard looked at me, then at Vanessa, then back at the phone. The bonfire popped. A shower of sparks rose and vanished. Nobody moved. Richard's voice came out low, the kind of low that happens when a man is choosing between fury and collapse. Who the hell is Derek? Vanessa didn't answer the question. Instead, she pivoted. The way she always pivoted. She turned to the family, tears already forming, arms open in appeal. She's doing this to destroy us. Can't you see? She's always been jealous, always resented Megan. Richard. Ruth stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The timestamps are consistent across 3 months. The photos are geotagged. This isn't fabricated. The phone was being passed now. Uncle Bill read it and set it down like it burned. Cousin Jake looked at the screen, then at Vanessa, then back again. Great Aunt Patricia held the phone at arm's length. She'd forgotten her reading glasses, but she saw enough. The murmuring started. Not loud, just the rustle of 40 people recalculating everything they thought they knew about Richard Hicks's perfect second act. Vanessa was crying now, full tears, the kind that come with sound. This is my family. You can't take that from me. But the tears landed wrong. They landed the way tears land when you've watched someone perform sincerity all day. You start to wonder which version is the act. Eleanor sat on the porch, still, watching. She didn't look surprised. Richard turned to me. His jaw was tight. His eyes were glassy. You planned this. I shook my head. No, you gave me a reason tonight. My voice was steady. My hands were not. But that was okay. Courage doesn't mean your hands don't shake. It means you speak anyway. And I wasn't done. Because that wasn't the grenade he should have been worried about. Vanessa was still crying when she made her mistake. Fine, she said, wiping her face with the back of her hand, makeup smearing across her cheekbone. Fine, I made a mistake, but that doesn't change anything. Megan is still our daughter. She's still Richard's. She almost said family, but she didn't finish, because I was already talking. Megan. The girl looked up. She was sitting rigid in her white sundress, gripping the seat of her chair with both hands, knuckles bloodless. I'm sorry, I said, softly, the way I speak to patients who are about to hear hard news. You don't deserve any of this. Then I turned to Richard. You said blood doesn't make family. Choice does. I let his own words sit in the air between us. So here's a choice. Ask your wife who Megan's biological mother is. The fire had burned down to embers. The light was low and orange and honest. Richard blinked. What? Vanessa lunged forward. Don't you dare! In her own messages, I said, Vanessa wrote to Derek, and I'm quoting, she doesn't know. R thinks she's mine. That's all that matters. I didn't shout it. I didn't need to. The words moved through the circle like a wave through still water, slow, wide, and impossible to stop. Richard turned to Vanessa. She was shaking her head. No words, just the head, moving side to side, like a metronome winding down. Megan stood up. Her chair scraped the stone. "Mom," she said. One word, one syllable. All the questions in the world packed into 3 letters. Vanessa couldn't look at her. The perfect family Richard had built to replace me, it was never real. It was a photograph of a house with no foundation. I've worked emergency rooms for 6 years. I've seen people receive the worst news of their lives under fluorescent lights. There's a look that crosses their face. Not shock, exactly. More like recognition. As if some part of them always knew, and the rest just caught up. That was Richard's face. He turned to Vanessa. "Is this true?" She was crying hard now. Not the beautiful kind from before. The ugly kind. The real kind. "Is this true?" Louder. "It's complicated," she whispered. Those 2 words did more damage than my phone ever could. Because "it's complicated" isn't a denial. It's a confession wearing a disguise. Richard sat down. Not in a chair. There wasn't one behind him. He just sat. On the flagstone. Like his legs had made a decision his brain hadn't approved. The bourbon glass was on the ground. Someone's foot knocked it, and it rolled in a lazy semicircle, catching firelight. Megan was backing away, step by step. Her white sundress caught the orange glow of the embers. She looked like a ghost leaving a house she'd just learned was haunted. "Megan!" Vanessa reached for her. The girl flinched. Actually flinched. The way a person does when the hand reaching for them has lost the right to comfort. Cousin Jenny, God bless her, was already on her feet. She put an arm around Megan's shoulders and guided her toward the house. No words, just presence. Sometimes that's enough. Eleanor hadn't moved from the porch. Her cane rested across her knees. Her face was still, but her eyes held the look of a woman who'd watched a building she'd warned everyone about finally come down. "Is this true?" 3 words. His whole world, in 3 words. And no one at that table could help him hold it up anymore. Ruth let the silence do its work for exactly 10 seconds. Then she stood. "Richard," her voice was the calmest thing in that yard. "As your sister, I'm sorry you're hearing this. As a lawyer, I need to say something." Richard looked up from the ground. His face was blank. The kind of blank that comes after a system crash, when the screen is still glowing but nothing's running behind it. "The estate documents you filed, the ones you wanted me to revise, were based on the assumption that Megan is Vanessa's biological daughter. If that information is inaccurate, those documents may need to be reviewed." "Ruth," Vanessa started, "you can't just—" "I'm not finished." Ruth didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. If false information was provided in legal paperwork, custody documents, for instance, that's not a family matter. That's a legal matter. The word legal moved through the group like a cold draft. Uncle Bill straightened. Patricia set her jaw. Even Cousin Jake, who'd been silent for 20 minutes, looked up. Vanessa's composure, what was left of it, collapsed. "You can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you, Vanessa." Ruth folded her arms. "The truth is—" I stood to the side, silent. I didn't add to it. I didn't stack on. The machinery of consequence was turning on its own now, and it didn't need me to push. Richard was staring at the space between his shoes. His perfect second family, his clean narrative, his escape from the mistake of his first marriage, all of it, exposed. Not by enemies, but by the truth he'd chosen not to look for. I felt no triumph, just the strange, hollow calm that follows an emergency after the sirens stop. I could have left then. Nobody would have blamed me. The job was done. The truth was out. I could have walked to my car and driven home in silence. But I needed to say one more thing. Not for them. For me. I turned to Richard. He was still on the ground, but he'd pulled himself onto the edge of a chair. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. "Dad." He flinched at the word. "Good. I didn't come here to humiliate you." His eyes met mine for the first time all evening. Really met them. Not the glance and dismiss from the porch, not the smirk from the speech. This time, he saw me. "I came because Grandma invited me, because I'm a Hicks, because I've spent 22 years trying to earn something that should have been free." My voice stayed level, steady, the way I've trained it to be at 3 a.m. in a trauma bay when everything is going wrong and the only thing keeping the room together is the person who refuses to fall apart. You called me a mistake. In front of everyone I share blood with. Tonight. He opened his mouth. I shook my head. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for a place in your will or your Christmas card or your family portrait. I set my water glass on the arm of Eleanor's chair. I'm telling you this. This is the last time you get to define who I am. I straightened my shoulders. From now on, if you want me in your life, you come to me, with honesty, not performance. I turned and walked toward the porch. Behind me, the fire crackled low. Eleanor's hand found mine as I passed her chair. That's my granddaughter, she said, loud enough for all 40 of them to hear. Vanessa left first. She gathered her purse, grabbed Megan's cardigan from the back of a chair, and marched toward the Lexus without looking at anyone. Her heels punched the gravel like punctuation marks in a sentence she'd lost control of. Megan was already in the house with cousin Jenny. When Vanessa reached the front door, Jenny appeared in the frame. She wants to stay, Jenny said, quiet but firm. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked to the car alone. The engine started. The headlights swept across the yard, catching the faces of relatives who looked away. Tires on gravel. Then silence. Richard stayed. He sat in that chair by the dead fire while the family moved around him like water around a stone. Some people left with quick goodbyes and quicker steps. Others lingered. It was the lingerers who surprised me. Uncle Bill came over first. He shook my hand. Not with words, just the handshake. Patricia followed, and she had plenty of words. Your mama raised you right, sweetheart. She held both my hands and looked at me the way nobody in that family had looked at me in years. Directly. Cousin Jake. I always liked you better anyway. He said it with a half smile, but his eyes were serious. 3 of my second cousins, women I'd met maybe twice, found me on the porch and said variations of the same thing. We should have said something sooner. Maybe they should have, but I wasn't keeping score anymore. Eleanor invited me to stay the night. The guest room was already made up. Sheets turned down, water on the nightstand. She'd prepared it before I arrived. Maybe before I'd even said yes. I lay in that room and listened to the Virginia night through the open window. Crickets, a barn owl, the sound of an old house settling. I didn't cry, I was too tired for that. But I didn't sleep either. 1 week later, the fallout was measurable. Richard and Vanessa fought for 3 days straight. The neighbors on their street in Arlington could hear it through the walls. I know because cousin Jake lived 2 blocks over and told me. On the 4th day, Vanessa packed 2 suitcases and moved into a hotel. By the following Monday, Richard had called Ruth. Not to apologize, not to talk about me, to ask her, in a voice she described as 10 years older than the week before, to review his estate documents again. Ruth agreed. On one condition, Dahlia's name goes back in. Not because Dahlia asked, because Eleanor demanded it, and Eleanor was still the one whose signature held the trust together. The family grapevine moved fast. Within days, the reunion story had traveled through every branch of the Hicks family tree. The version varied depending on who told it, but the core was the same. Richard's perfect second act was a lie, and the daughter he called a mistake was the one who told the truth. Vanessa's Facebook went dark. The blessed family posts, the matching outfit photos, the gratitude captions, all gone, replaced by silence. Derek, the man in the messages, blocked Vanessa's number. His last text, forwarded to me by accident one final time. Don't contact me again. But the call that broke me open came 10 days after the reunion. My phone rang. Unknown number. Different from Derek's. I almost let it ring. Dahlia, it's Megan. I sat down. I didn't know, she said. Her voice was thin and careful, like she was carrying something fragile. About any of it. I didn't know about Derek. I didn't know about me. I'm so sorry. Megan. I closed my eyes. You have nothing to be sorry for. The line went quiet. Then she said, Can I call you sometimes? Anytime. Richard called 3 weeks after the reunion. I was eating cereal at my kitchen counter at 7 a.m., still in scrubs, home from a night shift. I almost didn't pick up. The old Dahlia would have lunged for the phone, would have rehearsed her opening line, would have hoped again that this was the call where everything changed. I picked up on the 5th ring. I didn't rehearse anything. Dahlia. Hi, Dad. Silence. The kind that happens when a man calls with something to say and realizes he doesn't know the words. I messed up. His voice was raw, not the polished voice from the reunion, not the speech voice. Something underneath, unpracticed and rough like a muscle he hadn't used in years. I know that. I waited. I've learned that silence, when you let it work, will tell you everything about who's on the other end of it. I don't know how it got this bad. It got this bad because you let it, Dad. More silence. What do you want me to do? He asked. I thought about that. I thought about 22 years of Christmas cards without my face. About a graduation where my seat was empty. About a bonfire where 40 people learned what I was worth to my own father. I want you to sit with what you did, not for me, for yourself. Dahlia, I'm not punishing you. I'm not closing the door, but I'm not going to open it wider just because you knocked. I could hear him breathing. When you're ready to be honest, not just sorry, call me. I hung up, set the phone on the counter, finished my cereal. It was the hardest phone call of my life, and the most necessary. I drove back to Charlottesville one more time that summer. Not for a reunion, just to see Eleanor. The farm was quieter without 40 people on it. Just the oak trees and the porch, and the sound of her wind chimes arguing with the breeze. We sat together and drank sweet tea and didn't talk about Richard for a full 30 minutes. We talked about her garden, about my patients, about a cardinal that kept dive-bombing her mailman. Then she said, "You know, I was angry at you for a long time." I looked at her. Not for what you did at the reunion, for what you didn't do all those years before it. She took a slow sip. You let him treat you like an option, and every time you came back smiling, you gave him permission to do it again. She was right, and it didn't sting the way it would have a year ago. It landed like a diagnosis. Uncomfortable, but clarifying. On the drive home, I rolled the windows down. Virginia in August. Hot air and cicadas and that green smell that sticks to everything. I called my mother. Mom, you were right, all along. I didn't want to be right, honey. I know. We sat with that for a while. Two women on a phone, 100 miles apart, holding the same silence. I thought about what I'd learned. Not the big dramatic lesson that makes a good speech, the quiet one, the one that sits in your bones. I spent 22 years auditioning for a role that was never written for me. 22 years learning lines for a play where my character gets cut in the first act. The bravest thing I ever did wasn't pulling out that phone. It was putting it away and walking off the stage. 3 months after the reunion, I got promoted to charge nurse. My supervisor said I was the calmest person she'd ever seen in a crisis. I laughed. She didn't know the half of it. Eleanor came to visit me that October. She took a car service from Charlottesville, 3 hours each way, because she wanted to see my apartment. She walked through every room, inspected the kitchen cabinets, tested the water pressure, and declared my houseplant optimistic but doomed. Then she sat at my table and said, "This is yours. You built this." That mattered more than any inheritance. Megan started texting me every week. Nothing heavy at first. Memes, homework complaints, a photo of a dog she saw on the bus, normal teenager things, the kind of nothing that means everything when it's new. One evening she texted, "Do you think I'll be okay?" I typed back, "I think you already are." We were building something, not the manufactured bond that Richard and Vanessa had staged for family photos. Something real, something that grew sideways, through cracks, the way stubborn things do. Richard hadn't called again. Some nights I picked up my phone and stared at his name in my contacts. Some nights I almost dialed, but I meant what I said. The door was open. He had to walk through it with something heavier than regret, and I was okay with the waiting. For the first time in my life, I was okay. I hung a new photo on my refrigerator that winter. Not a Christmas card, just a snapshot. Eleanor on my left, my mother on my right, Megan cross-legged on the floor in front of us. 4 women. No matching sweaters, no golden retriever, no performance. I don't need his call to know who I am. I figured that out on my own. If you've ever been the one in your family who was overlooked, replaced, or called a mistake, I see you. You're not a mistake. You never were. If this story spoke to you, drop a comment telling me, what boundary do you wish you'd set sooner? And check the description for more stories.